And welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm looking forward to sharing a lot with you and at the same time learning from you. This is actually an interesting webinar topic for me because in many ways I probably walk into this conversation least informed of everyone, or certainly not as informed as some others who are here with us. And I'm going to be leaning on your expertise. And the reason I say that is because although I consider myself pretty good in the area of active learning, specifically because I am looking to focus on engaging remote learners, as you see here on the screen and as you saw in the description of this presentation. I'm going to be leaning on individuals who are here who are doing it every single day in a way that I'm not. I'm doing it in webinar form, which is not bad. And I'd like to think that my engagement level are relatively high considering the nature of what we're doing. But that said, there are tips, there are tricks, there are tactics, there are practical things you guys are doing every day or that you see team members doing. And I would encourage you certainly to share that at the appropriate time, because not only do I want to learn from you, but I want to make sure that everybody is learning from each other. And I also wanted to begin, as I often do, with a prayer that we should all be safe and well. I hope everybody who's on this call is safe and well. If you are not feeling well, if you are not 100%, I thank you so much for being here anyway. But I'm hopeful that the world at large can start to see a turn in this difficult situation which we find ourselves, and certainly to gain from the inspiration being here today, being part of a community of learners, a community of professionals who takes their craft very seriously and recognizes this as an opportunity, despite the challenges we're all dealing with, to be here, to show up, to learn, to bring that learning back both presently and in the future, as we are going to hopefully be able to explore this further and further today. And I have a feeling, it's kind of interesting because as I'm talking with professionals, not just educators, but people who are in the business world, many of my clients are not educational or educators, I should say, at this point in my career. There's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of possibility, frankly, about what the future will look like. And will we go back to life before Corona in the fullest sense of the term, or will we have some kind of hybrid between what we're dealing with today and what our life used to look like, and have some kind of blended outcome as a result of that? And I have a feeling that when it comes to education, there is a lot that is going to be changing because we invariably were forced to go all in on this remote learning profile. There will likely be changes in how we teach, even if we wind up back in the classrooms the way we once did. I'm sure that there are things that we will be using that we didn't consider using in the past, but now that we've developed some familiarity with it, we're not going back to our old ways. And to me, there's some exciting possibilities as a result of that. So I really hope that this will provide great value for you, and I hope that you will all consider contributing early and often to our time together, to our conversation. So with that little introduction in mind, let's move forward. For those of you who do not know me, I am a former classroom teacher and college professor turned school leader, turned executive coach and consultant. So that's what I do presently, but I've been in the field for about 20 years all in, and loved every minute of it, and still work with schools and school leaders, teachers, administrators, and students on a variety of different levels, from professional development to in-class instructional coaching to leadership support, and on and on. And so it's always a pleasure to engage with my favorite group of people. And I thank you all for being here. And I certainly hope that we will be able to build upon this in future ways. But for now, my focus is on helping leaders in particular deal with matters of productivity, delegation, and all that good stuff. And I did, by the way, do a recording yesterday on the tips of delegation. If you want to, I do have a YouTube page, and you can follow me there. Would love to always increase engagement on all forms of social media where I exist. And specifically, I do post the recordings of these sessions after they are completed. Number one, I share them via email, so you will be getting an email tomorrow with that recording, but I do also upload it to YouTube. So if you want to go ahead and check on any of the recordings that have been done over the last few weeks, I would encourage you to do so. And if you need to reach out to me personally for whatever the specific needs are, please don't hesitate. And I will mention now, and probably again later, a number of you, maybe not present, but for those who participated yesterday, had many requests for certificates. So you may need certification for continued learning. I do offer a DIY version of a certificate. So basically you just have to enter your name, the session you attended, the date that it occurred, and you have the certificate. So I would encourage you to reach out to me afterwards. For that, today specifically, I won't be available for a couple of hours after the webinar, but I will get back to you with it as soon as I can. So very quickly, let's jump right in. And by the way, I can't offer you any real benefit for doing this other than your learning, but I would encourage everybody to be taking notes. Maybe you want to pull out a small notepad of paper if you don't have one already. And I'd like for you to jot down every example of active learning that I engage in with you today, so that as we are using examples, later on when I ask you, what did you learn, which is, by the way, the right column of this graphic organizer, you'll have a lot of stuff to include there, in addition to the K, which you already know. So this is what I'd like for you to please do. As you're probably familiar, this is called a KWL. If you look at the image, you'll see why. K stands for what I know, W stands for what I want to know, and L is what I learned. The first two parts can be completed at the beginning. In fact, if you're doing any form of differentiation, you very well may want to consider doing this before you teach, maybe even a couple of weeks before you teach new content specific to this area. So for example, let's say you're going to be teaching the Civil War or a certain scientific concept or whatever that might be. You would like, I think in many cases, to get information in advance as you are preparing for that lesson or for that unit to find out what do your students already know about topic X. This is going to allow you to differentiate from the beginning, plan, and kind of meet students at their learning level, their prior knowledge, that kind of thing, rather than just going in making assumptions. So either way, and we're, by the way, going to dive into graphic organizer, time permitting, later on, because I think it's a great active learning technique. And I thought, therefore, we may as well start with this one. I know it's not interactive, and I know that I'm not modeling everything that I'm going to be sharing later. Again, I don't have necessarily all of the setup and all of the infrastructure and all the tools that you may have. But what I will ask you to do for just a couple of moments is to think about, in the topic of active learning, first, I'm going to ask you for a response to the left column. We'll do this in order, but I'll explain it all now. I want to know what you already know about active learning. It could be everything from what it is, some examples, why it's important. And then the middle column will do as well, which is, what do you want to know? Okay, why did you sign up for this presentation as opposed to emailing me in advance and saying you'd like to give the presentation, right? What is it that you want to know about active learning that you feel you don't presently know? Keeping in mind, by the way, that some person's K may be another person's W, all right, and vice versa. So we all have different knowledge, different skills, different experiences, and that's okay. My job in all of this is to try to make as much sense of it as I can in the small amount of time, not having any capacity to have interface communication, so to speak, with everybody individually, and still deliver the most valuable presentation possible in the time that we have remaining. So with that little introduction, please tell me, just put the word letter K, and then next to it, perfect with what Christine did is fantastic. Lots in the face-to-face environment, okay? So I'm not sure if that means, Christine, that you can do more of it when you're face-to-face or something different. Oh, I see you explained it. Okay, so maybe what you want to know is, how can you do more in remote? That's what it sounds like to me. If that's correct, you can say yes. All right, fantastic. Everybody else, what I'm looking for now is to start with the K. What do you know about active learning? Again, it could be information, it could be techniques, it could be its impact and benefit. Go ahead with that and we'll regroup shortly. And once again, as a reminder, please adjust your chat to all panelists and attendees so that Christine, for example, I was able to see it, but I'm not sure that everybody else was. You may want to copy and paste it and resend it to all panelists and attendees, and everybody else, please do the same. Thank you, Julia. Welcome back, or great to see you again. Role-playing and group projects has to do with students being more involved. Yes, excellent. Actively taking part. Great. Thank you, Cora. Thank you, Nasia. Important skills and strategies, I think. Thank you, Therese. So does that mean that you know the skills already? You know strategies already? Please clarify. And by the way, please expand to all panelists and attendees. Interactive, participation, use of hands, excellent. Partner activities, games with content, movement. Okay, everybody, again, a lot of responses are still coming to me as all panelists only. Please adjust. Okay, what do you want to know next? Okay, we're gonna get to what you want to know in just a second. Retain more information, working together. That's a great point, by the way. A different topic, but the idea of student retention is critical. And research is very clear. The more active students are, the more they will retain, as we will see shortly. Okay, students doing the work. Okay, excellent. Keep those coming. And now let's start also with the W. What do you want to know? Stated differently, what information, if I share it, would add the most value to you? Okay, let's see here. How to create active learning through virtual learning, building their work. Not sure I fully got it, Tasha. Maybe you could elaborate a little bit. Teaching methods and strategies that involve student participation with the material. Okay. Examples of engagement. Okay, back to what I know. Students engage, students retain. Excellent. Growth opportunities, how to involve students in virtual learning. Okay, that's probably the big draw here. If I had to, how to make a fun, active good. Thank you, Christine. We do want to make this fun as we possibly can. How to work in the environment. Okay. Strategies to help hires in engagement in small groups. So I have a feeling as I transition out to the next slide that I already know the answer to this question based on what you've been sharing, but you could either elaborate, or you've already shared some things, so you don't necessarily have to answer again. But now that you have been doing this for a while, right, what would you say are the primary challenges of helping students, making your remote teaching as and their learning as active as possible? Okay, what are the challenges that you are experiencing as you are providing instruction that your students, you wish they were more engaged? Okay, how to get them engaged, how to keep them engaged, lack of tech-savvy parents, that's an interesting one. My fumbling use of the technology, I wonder if that means your own, Christine. Okay. It is interesting. We do have to train parents on some level, and as a parents of, in our school's case, because of, let's call it, religious considerations, we're actually pretty low tech in the sense that everything is being done with phone only, not with Zoom or internet. So you can imagine that that's even more challenging from an engagement perspective. And parents need to be able to support whatever medium the school and the teachers are using, right? How to use it. Manipulatives are not there, right? They're all at school. Okay, connecting students together could be a challenge. All right, so we are going to, the good news is, despite all of the challenges that you are sharing, and they are very, very valid, especially because, again, we had to dive into this with almost no warning. So it's not like you've been prepping since August for Corona, to show up. So we have to figure out how can we not only get answers to our questions, but how can we be helping each other? And I would encourage you, if you are struggling in any way, shape, or form with technology, with active learning, with engaging your students, to be reaching out to your colleagues, to your peers, and finding out who's doing it and who's doing it well. What tools are they using, etc. Let's make sure that we support each other as much as possible in a very important space, because we've talked about this before. It doesn't matter how good we are as teachers if the learning is not occurring. And we can't force the learning to occur, but we can do whatever we want to do, whatever we possibly can to make sure that it happens. Deborah, that's an important consideration. If they don't have computer or internet access, we have to ask ourselves, how else can we engage? Maybe we can be sending materials in advance for them to be printing and looking at or something similar. But yes, you're going to be limited, especially if you are still using the internet as your primary form of instruction. Okay, so let's jump into that, right? We want to make that concept active. All right. Now, let's talk for a moment about why this is important. And I would say, honestly, even if you got no additional, let's call it tactical skills or techniques from our conversation, but just deeply understood the importance of our topic, I would say that that alone would be sufficient in terms of you participating in this presentation, because mentally we need to know that something is important. And once we do, once we really get the value of creating an active learning environment, whether it's virtual or in person, we're going to find ways to increase the activity. In fact, I would encourage you to write down on that pad of paper the question of, as you review your lesson plans, how can I make this even more active? And that should be an underlying question, the same way you want to be asking yourself every time you prepare a lesson, how can I ensure that my students retain this, for example, right? There's certain underlying questions that should always be top of mind, because if they aren't, we may forget about them. We may think about teaching the lesson, not so worried about how long they'll hold on to it. But if we can create more action, more activity, actually we're going to help on both fronts, because as you see over here in this pyramid, the further down you go, more to the base, the more active things are, the higher the likelihood of retention. Now, I'll show you another one which is a little bit different. The statistics are not exactly uniform, but the concepts are all the same. And you'll notice that the lecture at the very top is the least impactful. It's the least long-term, has the least long-term benefits. So if we talk, even though we think we're being clear, the likelihood of retention over time is very low. So we want to move them from lecturing and reading and even watching to doing. Just out of curiosity, what would you say right now is the, I'm going to say the word highest, but really I mean lowest in the visual sense, highest from a retention standpoint. What is the highest retention related activity that you typically do? So in other words, if you look at all of them and the most that you'll typically do is audio visual, you'll write that. If you're going all the way down to the bottom somewhere, you can write that as well. Just curious to know, what is your typical highest level of engagement? Okay, so I'm seeing a lot of practice by doing, some demonstration as well. That is excellent. That is excellent. Just curious to know, can anyone think of, as you are answering this, keep that coming, please. So I see a demonstration and discussion, which is in that middle to higher range, which is great. Practice by doing, excellent. Okay, let's think about, can we think of ways, for example, to have the students teach others? Is there a way to incorporate teaching into your practice? Just as an example, I don't want to go too deep on this for the moment. Can anyone think of a way by which you can, okay, so Shannon, pair, share during a lesson. Okay, if you have that flexibility, that would be great. All right, with teaching new concepts, perhaps remotely using breakout. Okay, good. Rally coach, where a student who understands the concept teaches a small group. Thank you, Deborah. Okay, so please pay as much attention to the chat as you are to me, because that's where the real magic is happening. You can see already where all of this great feedback is going. I'm still seeing some all panelists only responses. Please adjust as appropriate your settings in the chat to all panelists and attendees, okay? But having your students teach each other, maybe you even set up a time, or you have your students set up a time where they call each other after class and spend 10 minutes, each one reviewing a certain point, right? That's an example. Or yeah, so there was a point there, I think it was from Bob, I'm not certain, maybe even doing a jigsaw. I hope you're familiar with that. I'm not going to go too deep on cooperative learning, because I wasn't sure how practical it was for all of you. But if you can, for example, let's just use a simple example for this. So let's say we had 4 seasons of the of the year, right? And we wanted to do a unit or a lesson on weather, okay? And how each of the seasons are different in certain core areas. So you'd have 4 students. We'll call them an A, a B, a C, and a D. And the A's get winter, the B's get spring, the C's get summer, and the D's get fall. And each of the A's now pair with the other A's in the class. So you might have, for example, I'm just going to make up a number here. Let's say you have 16 students and you have 4 groups. So you've got 4 A's, 4 B's, 4 C's, and 4 D's, but you also have group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4. I hope that this is making some sense without being able to show it to you. But if you can create kind of like a visual grid in your mind. So every group begins with an A, a B, a C, and a D. They split up so that all the A's are focusing on winter, reading the packet, watching the video, whatever content you've created. They become experts on winter. They do an exercise, an activity where they discuss it and complete answers and maybe do some kind of internal performance, whatever that might look like. So you've created expertise with winter in group A, and the same with all the other seasons. Then every original group member from each letter kind of breaks up. So the A1, for example, goes back to group 1, A2 goes to group 2, A3 to group 3, etc. And then they teach their content to everybody else. And that's why Jigsaw can be so powerful, because it builds in so many elements. There's demonstration, possibly, there's discussion, there could be practice, and of course, there's teaching others. We all know, I mean, I would say for sure myself, I don't know if you would agree, but the things that I taught years later after having stopped teaching it, I still remember because I taught it. There was a demand cognitively for me to process, to understand, to present, and to therefore retain information that is not true for things that I did not teach or did not teach very often. So the more that we can create, thank you, Deborah, for that. Take a look at the chat, everybody. The idea is that we want to create as much active opportunity as possible. So the how, to some degree, I'm going to leave to you, because no matter what I share with you, it's not going to be enough, or it's not going to necessarily be for everybody, or maybe there's more. The point is, now that you know why, now that you know how important it is to build in active learning, and despite the limitations, we talked at an earlier couple of sessions actually on the topic of mindset, right? Some of us, I would assume, because we're a large group already, I would assume that there is a range of mindset over here with the almost 60 people on this call about, how much, where am I in growth mindset versus fixed mindset? And what do I see myself vis-a-vis specifically remote instruction, right? How do I view my capacity? Do I have the ability to grow? Am I able to implement new strategies and concepts? So the more that we are growth oriented in our mindset specific to this topic, the more that we will embrace challenge, work hard, find new opportunities, experiment, and stick with the good things and build upon those that are a little bit weaker to ensure that our students are getting the very most that we are able to deliver. Okay, so is there anything here so far, just curious, is there anything that I did not mention that you would like to add to the technique list? Again, I have not presented in any depth some of the things that I have prepared, but I'd like to see what you are already doing that you feel is getting good response from your students and engaging them actively in your lessons. As you're thinking about it, look at the right side of this image and see where are you doing more of the yellow type activities. Leah, I'm not sure if that's a question. It seems like it is, but I'm not sure exactly what the question is. In the meantime, please share any strategies that you think would be a good representation or a good example of active learning. Nasya, Kate, thank you. Oh, as far as the jigsaw is concerned, it depends on what you're asking them to do, but it does take some time. It definitely does take some time. You could even split it out over 2 days or 2 sessions if you need to. It depends on how much it's going to take to learn the original content. Minimum, I would say 5-10 minutes, but usually longer. And then, of course, to go back into the original group and everybody share what they learned. And then possibly do an exercise after everybody has learned it. So you can kind of layer this. You start with a jigsaw, then you move into some kind of authentic assessment, different ways to approach it. Role plays, presentation. So a lot of authentic assessment here. Excellent. Think, pair, share. Okay, role playing, demonstration, apply. Excellent. We're gonna talk about this, yeah, as well. By the way, think, pair, share is great. A number of you have already talked about it. I used it before. For those of you not familiar, you put a question out there. You ask students to think about them privately, so they have independent time. Great for those introverts like me. Then you move them into share pair mode, where they are reading with each other, discussing it. Okay, Christine, I'll get to your comment soon, assume it doesn't disappear in the chat. And then you share it with the group at large. So it's another way to engage people in a low stakes, relatively easy structure and get everybody talking, thinking, etc. Okay, nice. Okay, so you have them start with something bigger like an article. Thank you, Christine. Everyone take a look at that as well. All right, so we're going to move into some of the prepared strategies that I have to share with you. I suspect that many of them are already in use in this group, and that's great, good reinforcement. Maybe I can add a wrinkle or two or a couple of nuggets that will take what you are already doing to the next level. And obviously, if the things that you are using that I'm not mentioning, by all means, at the end, let's see if we could add those as well. So I think active response questioning, what we might call checking for understanding, formative assessment, that's all that first one, all different ways by which to find out what are the students doing, what do they know, make sure that they're sharing what they know on a regular basis. And a lot of it is just adjusting the questions that we ask. Some of this is easier to do in person. Some of it may be as easy to do online. You will know that better than me. But the idea is, instead of just doing our talking and presenting content, we want to be asking lots of questions and engaging our students, expecting them to be responsive. Number two, using graphic organizers and flowcharts, again, as a way of demonstrating what students know, moving them from passive to active. And the last one is authentic assessment. That usually is a little bit more substantial, but it doesn't have to be. Some of the best authentic assessment is relatively easy to implement. And I'm hopeful that everybody here, what I want you to do as we are, I've asked you to do a lot of things so far, respond in the chat. I've asked you to jot down some strategies that you've noticed me using and that we're working through together. I also would ask you to highlight the strategies by ranking them when we're done in terms of relevance to you and implementation. So in other words, I don't expect, if I share 10 things with you today, for example, I don't expect everybody to be using all 10 tomorrow or maybe even ever. What I do want you to be doing is identifying the 1 or 2, maximum 3 strategies that you are most committed to either using more often or getting started with. Okay, because if we try to grab too many, we'll lose it. If we don't commit to anything, we'll also lose it. So I think a small number of things we're really prepared to commit to and putting it on our to-do list in a real way that we will follow up with is the best strategy over here. Okay, and you will notice, by the way, that ranking is a nice way to get people thinking and get people responding. So that's one that I wanted to use. Okay, can you please comment over here and tell me what you see in these different images that are examples of active response? Okay, engagement, checking for understanding, participation, active, 100%, every person responding. Now, as you're continuing to put your answers in there, which are fantastic, I do want to let everybody know, in case it's not clear. One of the things we always try to avoid in this type of environment is having certain students, let's say, piggyback off of other student answers. So with a chat, one of the benefits is that you can't see what I'm responding until it actually pops up in the chat. What you may want to do, and here's something that's a little bit different than some of you may be used to, there's something called wait time. Wait time is you want to give students 7 seconds, ideally, minimum of 5, of time to process a question and offer a response before fielding any responses. So let me say that again, and maybe a different way to make sure that that is fully clear. Oftentimes in our classroom, we ask a question and kids' hands shoot up immediately. In fact, some hands may go up before the question is even completed because the student thinks they know what's being asked. Oftentimes they don't even get the right answer because they're not thinking properly. But what we want to do here is we want to encourage our students to wait, ideally 7 seconds, because it is that time that all students should have the ability to go into their happy retrieval place, get the information that they need and bring it out. Meaning to say that when we have students that don't respond, it's not necessarily because they don't know. It's because we didn't give them enough time to find the information from where they had stored it and extract it. Or maybe we didn't offer enough ways by which to have that information be extracted, right? Information is stored in different ways and by different students, some short term, some longer term. Oftentimes it's stored by episode or circumstance. So for example, something as simple as the way the teacher was dressed or the hand motion that was used or the environment in which the learning occurred, or maybe some kind of mnemonic device or something that a student connected. And if we trigger that, then the students will respond more rapidly. If we don't trigger it, it'll take longer for the students to find it. For example, you may have seen this in your experience, and you can definitely do a thumbs up on this one if you have seen this happen before. Let's say you are giving a test, the conventional paper and pencil test, whatever you typically do. And as the test is being completed by the students silently at their desks, and you are sitting at your desk in the front of the room, the student all of a sudden lifts up her head, looks directly at you or maybe the wall behind you, kind of glares at it, doesn't necessarily do anything, looks back down and continues on with her test. If you have seen that happen before, please put a thumb up, raise your hand so that we can see if this is a common occurrence for you. So far I've got 7 or 8 hands and a bunch of yeses in the chat as well. Okay, does anyone know why this happens? I kind of alluded to it before, but maybe you could articulate it. Why is this happening? Why are students lifting their head, looking at you or the wall, and then putting their head down and, okay, they're thinking true, but why are they looking up at you? There's something that they're doing subconsciously. Does anyone know what it is? Okay, yes, it is a form of trigger. You talk about imprinted environmental response. I'm not exactly sure what that is, but yes, the trigger is the piece. They are using you. I hope you don't mind me saying this. They are using you as a retrieval cue because the information came from you. Their brain processed it in the environment in which it occurred. And therefore, as a result, seeing you helps them bring the information to the front of the room. I actually attended a session on memory and retention, and the presenter said, and I do not expect anyone to do this, and I'm not suggesting you try, but I will tell you what she said she did. And that is she wore the same outfit for an entire unit because she did want to be the maximal retrieval cue possible. She also would never test in a room other than where the learning occurred, which is something we sometimes will do. Let's say, for example, a standardized test in a larger space. She also never had a substitute provide a test and not monitor. There's a better term for proctor the test because she wanted to be that retrieval cue and, of course, make sure that everybody understood the questions. So those are important pieces as well. Anyway, back to our regularly scheduled program. We want to talk about ways to ensure active continued response. So here alone, thumbs up and thumbs down. We'll talk about C and I in a minute for correct and incorrect. If you do multiple choice, 1 finger of A, 2 fingers of B, etc. Or you might do A, B, C, D, and you list the questions orally, or maybe you put it into the chat and you have students respond. This one that you see on the right side are small whiteboards. And that is a great way for students to work on it first and then share their answer. So back to wait time for a moment. If you tell your students that I'm going to tell you when it's time to respond, do not put anything into the chat until I say now, you're giving everybody a chance to think. You're also kind of timing the responses so that they're not waiting for a colleague or a peer to respond before they respond. They're all putting it out there at the same time. And if you're able to track your chat or whatever tool you are using to collect information, you'll be able to see who knows it and who doesn't. So it has the benefit of active learning. It also has the benefit of formative assessment. It's giving you feedback in real time about, did the learning occur? Do I need to reteach? Do I need to reteach some of my students? Are some of my students ready for more, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a great piece in the whole differentiation puzzle. Okay, feel free to comment or question as we move forward. Here are some sampling examples. So I'm asking only a handful of students, but I'm prepping everybody at the same time. So be ready is a way of saying everybody be ready. Right? One of the things we want to avoid at all costs is putting a child's name at the front end of a question. So instead of saying, Jenny, what is 2 plus 3? We would at least minimally want to say, what is 2 plus 3, Jenny? Okay, so the whole class will hear the question in anticipation that they might be the one who's being asked to respond, and then they actually provide the response. The first one is even better because I tell you, be ready to do X, whatever the X might be, and everybody gets ready to do it, whether they actually are called on or not. Now, because this is virtual, you really don't have to sample. You could ask literally everybody to answer every question, however you collect that information. But if you only want to summarize because it's too much information and you want to maintain a flow to your class, etc., then minimally asking everybody in advance. I'll give you a minute to think about. If you look at number 2, any of these questions that prep the students and give them a chance to think and prepare their answers, and then you sample from the class, that will still give you good feedback about what your students know, and at the same time keep everybody more mentally engaged because they know that it could be them next. And that is a healthy form of tension that we want to encourage and activate so that the students are taking an active posture in the learning. Okay, now here are some signaled responses. You'll notice the first one is probably not doable unless you have some kind of Zoom, where everybody's on with their camera, are able to see everybody. Maybe there is an emoji that they could be using in a chat or some other thing with a check or an X, right? If you agree, thumbs up. If you don't agree, thumbs down. Check mark, X mark. How many fingers, like for example, for number 2, signal with your fingers, how many parts oxygen are there to hydrogen in a water molecule? So if the answer is 1, right, for 1 to 2, so then you would put let's say 1 finger in one hand, 2 fingers in the other hand, or you might do 1:2 or some variation. All of these could work, but what you're doing is you're simplifying the question. You're using easy ways to articulate it that doesn't require lots of words, and you're getting still the response that you want. So for the third one down, for example, I might say to you, here's a statement. If you think it's correct, put a C in the chat. Or if you have the camera, show me with a C. If it's incorrect, hold one finger up and show me an I. And if you're not sure, don't respond at all, which means if I don't see your response, I'm going to assume that you're not sure. Something like this, okay? Simple ways to collect information from multiple students simultaneously. Okay, number 4 is really great in the sense that you don't want to catch students, but you want everybody to know that you expect them to be ready at some point. So when you're ready, raise your hand, and you could see when hands are raised. The last one is particularly challenging, I would think, in a virtual environment. But instead of then saying in your book, point to the name of the primary character, you might say in the chat, type in the name of the primary character, or type in the sentence in which the story pivots from X to Y, whatever that might be. Okay, there are a lot of ways to do this. The main thing is we're thinking about, we want everybody to participate. We want everybody to show me what they know and to do so in a way that is as simple and straightforward as possible. The more that you can condense or compress student responses into a finger, a number, or a letter, or a one-word response, as opposed to a lengthier response, the faster you'll get them to respond, number one, the faster you can measure what they know, and the sooner you could pivot to the next thing, right? Dead time in an environment like this is not really our friend. I'm not sure that it's ever our friend, because from a classroom management standpoint, we want to continue to create opportunities for students to be learning and engaged. But in a silent environment where there is no feedback, we have to be thinking about, how do I continually present, share, empower, collect information, keep the process moving, and keep the process active, okay? We may want to take a moment now just to kind of reflect before I transition further on some of the active learning techniques that you already have either seen me use or heard me share that you think will be of particular use for you as you're moving forward. And it's okay if you're already doing it. That would be even better. You know, if I'm just sharing something that you're already doing and you can kind of pat yourself on the back and say, this is great, I'm doing it already, I'm just going to do more of it because I recognize how important this is. That's totally cool. That's great. Okay, it doesn't matter to me. But do go ahead and take a mental inventory of what we've shared before we move on, so that it gives us a sense of processing, like I said, before we keep going with things. Okay, so you can continue to do that. I'm going to move the slide deck forward so that we can continue to unpack some other strategies as well. Okay, thank you for sharing. Those of you who did already put it in there, great. Okay, hands up, questioning, using the chat, doing more of the question before saying the student's name, strategies and how to use, how to time responses. Okay, great. Chat and Zoom. I'm just sort of reading through your comments as they're going, so keep them coming. Okay, here are some other tools or ideas for collecting student response. And here, frankly, you probably know this better than me, but I will go through all four of them. And there are more. I'm going to share with you a website that's got 75. So I hope I don't blow anyone out of the water with that one, but you can look at that one on your own time. So number one, forms and polling tools. So anything where you have the questions created in advance and you could take a quick poll, or maybe you could even do it in the moment. So anything that you are using that allows you to poll your audience and get feedback from your students, that would be great. And if anyone is using that, you can type in the kind of tools you are using. And when you do, by the way, since we're going to be moving through other options as well, before you write the tool, you might want to just write what the tool relates to. So for example, for the first one, you might want to write forms dash and then write the actual tool name. And for the next one, which I want to talk about, which is group collaboration tools, that's great for anything involving cooperative learning, pairing, small group. Think in terms of TAPS. TAPS is an acronym. It's a great acronym for instruction. It stands for together, alone, paired, small group. TAPS, TAPS, together, alone, paired, small group. So every structure that we have should fit one of those four models. If I'm lecturing, that's together. If it's independent work, that's alone. If it's pairs, like two students think pair share, that's pairs. And if you want them in a jigsaw or somewhat of a larger group, that's the last one, S, which is small group. Everything you do is going to fit into one of those four. So therefore, having a tool, since you can't do this in person, that allows students to collaborate, whether it's jigsaw or STAD or numbered heads or any type of cooperative method you are comfortable with, that's the resource you want to be using for this purpose. So if anybody knows a good collaboration tool, Christina, thank you for mentioning Nearpod and Mentimeter for forms. If you know other forms, please, like even Google Forms. I think there are a lot of different ways to use forms, a lot of polling tools. Maybe some of you are using specifically designed school software for remote learning that has a lot of this stuff already built in. And then you could just use it because it's a tool built into your toolkit. For those of you who don't have that resource, you probably want to be able to access other ones. Google Hangouts, for example, is now available to larger groups for free. You could use Zoom. Word Cloud is for which one, Leah? I'm assuming that actually, I shouldn't make an assumption. Tell us, please, how you use that. Is it a form? Is it a collaboration tool? I'll use it for polling. Okay, great. Groups, Zoom breakout groups, excellent. Okay, keep those pieces coming. Everybody take a look at the chat as it unfolds. Make sure everybody is all panelists and attendees so we could all see it. And then let's move on to number 3. Now, number 3 is not really an active learning technique per se. It's just good instructional practice, which happens to lend itself to active learning, and that is chunking your content. So if you are familiar at all with Madeline Hunter and the way that she breaks down the lesson, once you get to level 4, or step 4, which is inputting means you're sharing the information. You don't want to share too much. What you want to do is you want to chunk the information, and then you want to work that information through a process. So you chunk it, you teach it, and where appropriate, you model it. That's number 5. And then you check for understanding, make sure that they understand it. Then you provide opportunity for guided practice, and then independent practice, and then closure. So you work through an entire process specific to one chunk of information, and then you offer chunk number 2, and you work that through the entire process. So for example, let's say we're going to be talking about the primary causes of the Revolutionary War, or something similar to that. And so let's say I've got 4 of them. So I'm going to chunk my content based on one of those big reasons, big ideas. I'm going to work it all the way through, make sure they understand that very well. And then I'm going to provide closure, and then I move on to the next one. Now, the reason that this fits on our slide over here is because the more we chunk, the smaller the bits are, the easier it is for the brain to process and hold on to it. If it's too long, the brain starts to phase out. Okay, the last one is video creation. Kids could do it with all sorts of different tools and techniques. They are far more sophisticated usually than us. The main thing is they're creating responses to something or a product or a process, whatever it might be, and then they are sharing it either with us individually or with the class as a whole. So let's use the various techniques out there or tools that are out there. Thank you for the Flipgrid reference, Christina. Whatever you're using for your students, have them out there so that your students can be engaged with it. And if you do flipped classroom or you're thinking about it, this would be a great time to be experimenting, because you could show them a video, for example, and then they can go ahead and watch it in advance and then kind of go from there. Now, what I really should have done here was to grab this URL in advance, and maybe I still can do it. I think I can. I'm going to grab it right now and then drop it into the chat for those of you who want to see it in the chat and click on it. Here are 75 different resources, digital tools, apps, etc. I have not gone through them. I have not vetted them. These were created in 2019, so they may be a little bit dated. There may be more tools out there now, but at least it's a good place to start, and it does break it down by type of tool for your specific needs. So if you want video creation, you can figure out where in the article that can be found, etc., etc. Okay, now I am going to be moving quickly. Time is not on our side at this point. I will just mention that using graphic organizers is great wherever you can. It's a great resource for different kinds of learners. It helps students demonstrate what they know. It encourages them to think about information differently. It creates a visual snapshot for everybody to see, or for the student to see at once, and can be used at any point of the learning process. So we used the KWL earlier, for example, as a brainstorming tool. It's also something we could use to present findings. So for example, the L in the KWL will present what we learned, and that's a presentation of our findings. Okay, there are many of them here, just a couple, and please forgive the graininess of the graphics, whether it's a spider map where you've got the main topic or theme in that center area, and then you have details that emerge from it, or you're ranking. So for example, I might ask you to rank all of the different strategies we talked about today, the top 3. In fact, let's say I'm going to do that. So let's prepare for that now, with 1 being the most impactful, 2 second, and 3 third. The one on the bottom is similar to what we talked about earlier. It's a KWLH. So it's got the 3 columns on the left, and then the one on the right side is how can we learn more. And that might be searching on Google. It might be going to a library. It might be something different. So asking students to go a little bit further and try to figure out the next steps. Problem solution, Venn diagram. Those of you not familiar, on the right side, that's where you want to compare and contrast two concepts. So the unique qualities are on the respective ends and the overlapping elements are in the middle. And if anyone ever were to meet up with Dr. Venn, though I don't think he's alive anymore, please do ask him to expand that center area for me, because I often find I don't have enough room in there, but that is a different conversation. Anyway, thinking about graphic organizers as a way to engage your students and then have them included. Many of them can be completed in Microsoft Word or in other tools or in other online programs. And so you don't have to have them printed out and handwrite it. They could actually type it in, whatever you think works best for you. Authentic assessment we've talked about in general terms, where students are responding. They're creating rather than responding. There are a lot of benefits, a lot of different ways to apply it. I'll just mention a few, and these are organized, by the way, based on student intelligences. So we all know that there are different ways in which we learn. There's verbal linguistic, there's logical mathematical, there's visual spatial, and each one has different things that we could ask our students to do. Something could be as simple as short answer questions. It could be more expansive, like a diary or an essay, or writing an article for a newspaper, or writing a test on the content that we created. Having your students looking at logical mathematical, a flow chart or a timeline, planning something. So let's say you want to plan a trip, maybe you're teaching history. And this is what I did with my history class years ago, that we created a time machine and the students had to go back to a certain time and place and answer certain questions specific to that location, the language and the currency and the type of weather and the clothing and the leaders and, you know, the key events and all that kind of thing. And they were then going to plan a trip and see all of these things happening in real life. Okay, so they're all really cool ways of getting creative, getting your students to take an active posture. It doesn't all have to be with you on the call at that time. A lot of this learning, in fact, I think what we need to be thinking about is getting the active learning to occur even when we are not present with our students, but when they are working independently. So there probably should be less lecture time and more work time, but supported work time, however that works best for you and for your students. Okay, the visual center, where our visual spatial with the learning, with the graphic center, the graphic organizers, you know, all this kind of stuff. Sorry, my words are blending over here, my apologies. A couple of other applications, oral kinesthetic. We talked about teaching a lesson earlier, role play, talk show, debate. There's so much we could be doing, and a lot of it could be a lot of fun. Some of you talked about it not being so engaging. We could make it super engaging, right? If you want to have students make a video of a puppet play that they're going to create about the Revolutionary War or who knows what, right? A debate, and they can film the debate, or maybe they could have a Zoom call and then record it. You know, this student talks and this student talks, the kind of like the back and forth. Maybe there's a moderator. You know, there's so much we could be doing if we want to be creative. And the artistic stuff, I don't even need to go there. I think, you know, you could just let your imagination run wild with different ideas of how to tap into student artistic expression. In many ways, we have more opportunity, I would think, now than before, because we're less worried about classroom management, or we're more focused on student engagement. And so we don't have to worry about who's going to interrupt who with a comment or whatever, or where that people are distracted. If at the end of the day they're producing the work, then we hope at least that we can assume that the learning actually occurred. Now, just looking at the clock, there is a good chance that I'll go a few minutes over. I hope that we keep it pretty tight on time. But if you need to go, I totally understand. I do want to share, though, that some free resources that I think you will appreciate will be forthcoming as well soon. And this is, I think, the last one in this segment, which is summaries and short responses. We alluded to this earlier. Having students, it's like an exit card or a 1-minute paper. What were the main things that you learned today? Of all the things that we learned, which one would you say is most meaningful in the context of X, whatever that X might be, right? Which one gives you the most appreciation for George Washington, the general, and which gives you the most appreciation for George Washington, the president? You know, something like this. They do a 1-minute or 3-minute response. I don't think it's ever 1 minute, and they submit it. Okay, and then when you get it, they are dismissed or they get a certain credit. I do think incentivization here is critical because we want to get students to work in an environment where they think they're sort of on vacation. So we do want to motivate them as best as we can, share successes of students with other students, let students know what others are doing that is good, right? If you see a good practice, if you see strong effort or work ethic, or you see good performances, share that with other students so that they can see what their colleagues are doing and become more motivated to do the same. So here's a final thought before we enter into wrap-up mode, and that is a famous quote from Benjamin Franklin: "Tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me and I learn." And I would add involve me and I learn as well as retain. And these are things that we want to have our students do. Okay, we want them to think about these times not just as, oh my gosh, I was holed up in my house for whatever or forever, but rather I had some great learning that occurred during this time and it wasn't just a waste. Okay, some other webinars just so that you know what's coming forth. I've got a couple tomorrow. They're both leadership related, but every teacher is a leader. That's a different conversation, but you can look up some of my content on that online. I've done some presentations as well as some articles there. Find everything at impactfulcoaching.com/upcoming webinars. And I would include that on Monday and on Tuesday of next week, I have included 2 new ones, including one on, I'm trying to remember if I can, yeah, multiple intelligences is one. I know we talked about it a little bit today, but I'm going to go much deeper there. So you definitely want to go there if these topics are of interest to you and check them out. The link is right there. I'm sorry, Akona, that I'm not typing it in for you, but if you could just go to impactfulcoaching.com, you will find it. It's there. It'll bring you to a landing page, but if you click through the landing page, you will get to the home page, and then you'll find it on the top, or you could just type in the full URL there. I'll see if I could submit it into the chat as well. If anyone is actually willing to do it, let me include it for just a second. Sorry, I'm going the wrong way here. Let me go back for a moment. If anyone wants to grab that or just make a mental picture of it and type it into the link, that would be great. And yes, if you are on my email list already, you will be getting updates as well. So do not worry. Okay, let's move on. How can you support my mission of keeping these offerings free to include every and any educator that would like to participate? There are ways to support my work through that link over here, bit.ly/impactful donate, as well as at some point when live opportunities are again available. Would love to come and visit, meet you in person, and of course, find ways that we could collaborate towards continued growth. Leah, thank you for sharing that. These other ones, I may or may not get into the chat, but hopefully you can at least eyeball them and whatever. As far as the slide for yesterday, Connie, you probably will get an email shortly if you didn't already with the full recording. Okay. Now, a new free download that I just made available very recently is an ebook on handling stress. I think all of us are more stressed out than before. So please take a look at impactfulcoaching.com/stress ebook. Or if you go to my website, you can go to the books tab and you will find it there. So there are different ways to get that information. So I would encourage you all to head over to the website. There's so much there, actually, if I may be honest with you. There's a ton, lots of ebooks, a blog, a podcast, so much that you could be accessing for free, videos. So please, by all means, take a look. And then more, because I just want to be in a giver state over here. Productivity tools, a free productivity blueprint. If you want to be more productive at home, especially if you've got the kids around and all of that. If you want to take an assessment, tons of people took the assessment yesterday, and it was like populating in my inbox like there's no tomorrow. Take the assessment, find out how productive you are, find ways that you could be even more productive. Again, it's all on my website, all on the homepage, impactfulcoaching.com/home. If you just go there, you'll find everything in the navigation on the top. You'll be able to access it all. You'll be able to click on it and get started. And I think that is all. So please do stay in touch. I will try to keep these offerings coming as long as I can, being mindful of the fact that Passover is coming soon, at which point I will be offline for a bit, but I will continue to work to provide as much value as I can during this time, because I know how important it is for us to keep learning. I know how important it is for us to support each other. I think the best part of this conversation was the amount of productivity. If you can, thank you, by the way, and thank you for all the thank yous. If you can include the key takeaways before we go that you got today, the things that will most drive your performance, your students' active learning moving forward, that would be fantastic. Would love to see what you came up with or what resonated the most with you. I'll give you a few moments before I hang up the call for you to respond to that so everybody can see it. I am going to stop the recording at this point, and I'm going to also wish you all a great day in the event that you are leaving us. But again, would love to see what most worked for you. So please, thank you, Leah, for getting us started there. Let's please include those. And again, have a wonderful day.